John and Charles Wesley were born in 1703 and 1707 in Epworth. Their parents, Samuel and Susanna Wesley, had 19 children in total, but only 10 children reached adulthood. The children's education was in the hands of the remarkably gifted mother. Their father was usually away from home in London, and he was very unpopular in Epworth. He spent some time in prison for debt. In 1709, their home was set on fire and John was trapped in an upstairs bedroom. He was saved at the last minute, and Susanna told him that God had saved him for a special purpose. Both John and Charles achieved scholarships to Christ Church College in Oxford. John arrived in Bristol on the 31st of March 1739 and immediately started preaching. Charles arrived in September to support the open-air work. As far as John and Charles were concerned, everyone was entitled to have enough food to eat, decent clothes to wear, and a proper home to live in. And John hated unemployment because he felt everyone needed a job of some description. Idleness only bred more problems for the poor. John Wesley did not think you could entirely eradicate poverty, but he believed it was possible to make its impact less devastating. It required those who had money to be less selfish and greedy. It was far better to give money to the poor than spend it on the latest fashion. Some of the poorest were given either a small amount of money or food, clothing, or fuel. This was called outdoor relief. Some were locked away in the workhouse. Bristol pioneered the system, which was then widely copied. Families were separated because there were different wards for men, women, boys, and girls. All were made to do menial tasks for their food. The workhouses were made to be like prisons, so that the poor would do all they could, even die, rather than go into them. In 1739, Bristol was Britain's largest city after London, and it was one of the birthplaces of the Industrial Revolution. The city produced everything from soap, stoneware, and snuff to chocolate, cannons, and clay pipes. Among its biggest industries were shipbuilding, glassmaking, weaving, and sugar refining. Bristol was the greatest port outside of London. Its shipping had long carried the trade of Wales, Ireland, and the Southwest, and it was taking the lead in developing Britain's role in the triangular trade. This involved selling goods to slave traders in Africa, purchasing slaves and taking them for sale to the American colonies and the Caribbean, and then returning laden with cargoes of sugar, tobacco, and cotton. John and Charles Wesley preached in a variety of places in Bristol. They regularly spoke outside the city at Rose Green, Baptist Mills, Hanham Mount, and 2 Mile Hill in Kingswood, and they travelled regularly further afield to places like Bath, Frome, and Bradford-on-Avon. John and Charles began using a handful of young men as sons of the gospel, i.e., preachers. The first was John who came from Reading. He helped create a school for the colliers and their children at Kingswood. Methodist societies began to spring up in the areas they visited. Traveling around to encourage these became known as covering the circuit. Methodists still use that word for churches within a specified area. Work started in 1739 to provide the Kingswood colliers with a school. There was no church in Kingswood, and Wesley decided to make the school building big enough to also act as a preaching house. The money for the operating cost of the school at Kingswood came mostly from members at the New Room or from London. The opening of the Kingswood preaching house was delayed for many months because two of the teachers at the New Room stole £30 from the money collected for it. These two teachers later became highway robbers, and in 1742, one was hung and the other was sentenced to transportation. Between 1746 and 1748, John Wesley built Kingswood School to be a model Christian school for the children of his friends. The preaching house also then acted as the new school's chapel. The New Room was a place where John Wesley and his preachers were looked after and fed. However, the housekeeper was not just responsible for organizing the cooking, cleaning, and washing. In 1743, John Wesley asked Sarah Perrin to become the housekeeper because he wanted someone who could also lead class groups and encourage good behavior. He asked her to ensure that people behaved appropriately in the chapel and put her in charge of selling the books that he and Charles wrote. Sarah was probably one of the first female preachers, although she was never given that title. Sarah was quick to assess if a preacher was a poor speaker or was not living up to what he preached, and she was not afraid to voice her views. She remained an important figure of the New Room until 1757, when she moved with her husband to London. John Wesley encouraged his preachers to carry copies of his book, Primitive Physic. Wesley published the Medical Handbook in 1747, and it became the most popular medical book of its time, going into 23 editions. John Wesley always said that if you were very ill, you ought to see a good doctor, but he wanted those who could not afford doctors to be able to treat themselves. In Primitive Physic, he listed ailments alphabetically, giving a brief description of symptoms and suggesting a range of treatments, many of which were based on the work of doctors judged reputable in his day. These often involved herbs and plants that could be easily grown or found. Some of his remedies should stay firmly in the 18th century, such as drying and powdering a toad to make pills to help ease asthma. But some were effective remedies. For example, honey is used in many of his remedies, and science has subsequently confirmed its antiseptic and antibacterial properties. Some of his ideas were based on what was then the cutting edge of medical science, and so he advocated electrical treatment for a number of ailments, mental as well as physical. He also never forgot the power of prayer. This is John Wesley's study and bedroom. In this study, you will find personal items belonging to John Wesley, like his letter opener and seal, his riding crop, and an early edition of Primitive Physic, a book on health and well-being which sold over 1 million copies. At the back is John Wesley's bedroom. You can see his bed and a replica of his preaching gown. The statue of Wesley was built to his exact height. The new room is a chapel, a museum, a cafe, a gift shop, and meeting rooms. It's a place where people are welcome to come to learn, discover, and enjoy themselves. In 1739, John Wesley was asked by the members of two religious societies in Bristol to create a new room where they could meet. The resulting building served many purposes because John encouraged the religious society members to offer food and clothing to the poor, run a school for children, arrange visits to the nearby prison, and help the sick by running a free medical dispensary. Many of the features of early Methodism, including its class system, a way for Christians encouraging each other, first appeared at the new room. The new room was too small and not well enough built, so in 1748 it was rebuilt and doubled in size. These included creating a suite of rooms above the main room for use by John Wesley and other preachers. These now house a museum. Until the death of John and Charles Wesley, the new room acted as the most important center of Methodism outside of London. Many of the early Methodist conferences were held within it, and because of its location in Bristol, it played a particularly significant role in Methodism's increasing involvement in America and in the movement's anti-slavery campaign. For that reason, many Methodists come from all around the world to see it. Today, the chapel and its adjacent garden are found by many to be a wonderful oasis of peace in the center of a busy city. It seems like I've been in that place for an eternity.